Welcome back to Learning Hebrew. This week we are on Chapter 8, going over the direct object. As usual, we will start with the vocabulary. We have asher, which is that, which, who, or where. And this is a very common word in Hebrew, so it's best to memorize this as quickly as possible because it's going to come up a lot. It's probably one of the most common words you'll come across in sentences going forward. Next one is bein, which is between or among, and it sounds the same as the word bein for son, but you have the yod here, which gives away that this is between or among. It can be confusing when you're reading it out loud because it does sound like the word for son, but this one's different, and again, that yod is going to give it away. That's what the difference is. You have the verb haya, which is to be. You have ma, which can be spelled with a patak, a kametz, or it could be meh with a segal, and that is what or how. Ma'im is water. Milchama is war or battle, and milchamot is wars or battles. That's just the plural form. That's milchama. We also have mishpat and mishpatim, which is judgment, law, or justice. You have ad, until, as far as. Im is with, and this one can sometimes be confused with the preposition mi, which is from. I know in the class I've taught this before, that would get confused sometimes. So just get used to that. Also, this can also, it looks a lot like the word am, which is a people or nation. So just keep an eye on that. This one has a hirik. Im, which is with. You have asa, which is to do or make. Kol is voice or sound. You have the verb ra'ah, which is to see. And you have sa'ar or sa'arim, which is gate and gates, respectively. And you have sadeh and sadot, which is field or fields, respectively. And this one I always keep in mind is easy for me because sadeh sounds like sad, which is what you put down on a field. You put sod down. So that's how I remember that one, sadeh. So that is the vocabulary for this chapter. So the main point of this chapter is to go over the direct object. So very simple Hebrew sentences will have a noun and a verb, such as this. You have Hamelech Zachar, which is the king remembered. Here you have a noun, which is the subject, and you have the verb, Zachar. Simple sentences can also be made up using only a verb, and we had discussed this before. So you have this verb, shamarti, which is I guarded. And that is a full sentence. You have the subject and the verb, and it's all rolled into one word in Hebrew. So that is a way that, this is a complete sentence right here, made up of just a verb. But simple sentences can be made more complex by adding an object, which is what the verb is acting upon. So, for example, you have Hamelech Zachar Bein, which is the king remembered a son. And son here is the direct object of the verb, zachar. So that is how you can make a sentence a little more complex, is to have not just a subject and a verb, but a subject, a verb, and a direct object. So we've already talked about definite and indefinite nouns, and we know that a noun can be made definite by adding a hey as a prefix. This is a chet, but it's supposed to be a hey, so just imagine that there. Maybe that's a little better. I don't know. So, for example, you have this word ear, which is city. You can make it definite by adding a hey and making it ha'ir, which is the city. That's just a little refresher because now we're going to talk about definite and indefinite direct objects. So the direct object of a sentence can be definite or indefinite. So for example, the king remembered a son is a sentence that has an indefinite direct object. the king remembered a son. But if it was a definite direct object, it would be written like this. The king remembered the son. So this is the difference between an indefinite direct object and a definite direct object. And this is very important because of the next Hebrew word that we're going to learn, which is going to be a critical component of translating and interpreting Hebrew passages. And that is the word et. This aleph with a segal and a tav. So in Hebrew, when the direct object is a definite noun, in other words, when there is a definite direct object, it is usually preceded by the word et. And there's no translation for this word into English. We don't translate it. It's simply used to mark direct objects when they are definite. And the way that I was taught is whenever I see this, I always describe it as this is your definite direct object marker. It's used to indicate that whatever word is following this is the direct object, a definite direct object of the verb, which can be really helpful in translating sentences because Hebrew words can seem out of order in a sentence a lot of times, and this will help a lot to figure out what the subject of a sentence is and what the object of a sentence is. So we have this sentence here, which is Hamelech Zachar Bain, which we've already looked at, which is the king remembered a son. However, if you want the subject to be definite, it would be Hamelech Zachar et Habain, which is the king remembered the son. Again, you don't translate the word et. This is just a marker to indicate that the word following it is the definite direct object of the sentence. So that's how it looks in practice. Something else to keep in mind is that if a sentence has more than one definite direct object, et precedes each one. So here's a fairly lengthy sentence, and this is Avraham shalach et ha'ish va'et ha'isha va'et hana'ar la'ir. So this is Abraham sent the man and the woman and the young man to the city. So here you have three definite direct objects of the verb. You have ha'ish, ha'isha, and hana'ar. And because all of these are the definite direct object of the verb of the sentence, which is shalach, they each receive the et beforehand. Now again, you're not always going to see this in Hebrew, but this is a fairly consistent rule in the Hebrew text. So next we're going to look at a few verbs because these have some irregularities in the perfect tense. So these are the verbs ra'ah, yasha, and haya. And I just realized I have another typo here. This yod should be an ayin. So I have a totally wrong spelling here. This should be an ayin, not a yod, and it's asa. It's the word that's in our vocabulary. So hopefully you're following along in the book, which you should be. So maybe you already noticed that this is a mistake. So all the verbs have the same endings in the perfect tense, all the verbs that we've learned. However, when one of the 5 guttural letters are a part of the verb root, there are various changes. So I just took a picture of this page in the book because it goes through the lists and you'll see the changes here. The main change, or the main changes, are you're going to have different vowels from form to form. The endings are usually easy enough to notice. You still have the E ending for the first person common singular. You have the ta ending for second person masculine singular. There is a change for the second person feminine singular. And also, this is going to look a little different for third person masculine singular. But third person feminine singular, the ending is still the same. You have that ah ending. And then for the plural forms, the endings are almost exactly identical. You have nu, tem, ten, and u. In fact, they are, not exactly identical because the tav doesn't have a dagesh in it in these forms. But this is just an example, and it's good to know the differences. But this word in particular, haya, is irregular enough that it can be confusing to get used to. It can be difficult to get used to when you see it in practice. But this is a good chart for reference if you get lost. It's good to just look through it, notice the differences, because they will come up. Now we're going to look at the use of ad asher, et asher, and et. Or I should say more uses of the word et. So the verb haya and the word et. So haya does not take a direct object, which makes sense given that haya is the verb be, and be does not, even in English, doesn't have a direct object. So therefore, it does not take the direct object marker et. So you have this sentence here, hu haya ha'ish, which is he, you translate this as is the man. He is the man. But, I guess this is getting a little bit more into detail with language, but the verb be, it does, I don't know, I guess in writing it does have a direct object, but the direct object is simply referring back to the subject because of the verb be. So for instance, hu and ha'ish are the same thing. He and the man are the same. So who is the man? Well, the man is he. Who is he? He is the man. So the verb haya is simply connecting them. So the direct object is not like something else. Haya does not have, it does not take a direct object because whatever the direct object of haya would be is just referring back to the subject. So it's kind of weird in trying to describe it. I'm sure there's much better ways to describe it than what I did, but regardless, all right, this is the rule. Haya does not take a direct object, therefore it does not have the word et. Next, also the direct object marker et is sometimes followed by the word asher, and that makes it, that changes the meaning to that which or what. So again, asher has a lot of different ways to say it. So here's an example. Zacharti et asher ashiti, which means I remembered what I did, or I remembered that which I did. So that's how you translate that. Again, asher has a lot of different uses, so sometimes it can be confusing to know which use or which way to translate it, which that can bring in a whole lot of variation in how you'd want to translate a sentence. Usually it's pretty straightforward, but sometimes, it can be confusing. But when you have et followed by asher, usually means that which or what. You also have the phrase ad asher, which is an idiom meaning until. So here is an example. Halakti ad asher ra'iti et ha'ish, which means I went until I saw the man. So ad asher is an idiom meaning until. If you were to translate it literally, it still communicates the same concept. It's just really clumsy English for us. So if it was literally, it would be, I walked as far as that I saw the man. Or I walked until that I saw the man. Or I walked until, where I saw the man. It's just really clumsy to translate it that way. So it's just, the way we describe it is, it's an idiom meaning until. That's the idea being communicated by this word construction, so we just go with until is a good translation for ad asher. Now we're going to talk about something else, which is the phrase there was and there were in Hebrew. So as we have already talked about, the verb haya is used very much like the English verb be. For example, ha'ish haya al ha'ar, which is the man was upon the mountain, or the man was on the hill. functions the same way as the verb be in English. And as you noticed, be, depending on the tense, can almost take on a totally different word in terms of how it sounds. So you have the verb be. Well, be could also be is, or was, or were, or will be. So it can sound a lot different, but it's still the same verb, which is to be. Another example is this. Hayu ha'anashim avadim, which is the people were slaves. And just a quick note on this, I'm actually glad they use this as an example in the book because it highlights the importance of the word et. So for instance, looking at this on the surface, because these nouns are both plural and they're both masculine, although even if one of them were feminine, it wouldn't make a difference. It seems like either one of them could be the subject of this verb hayu. However, there is a difference here because this noun is definite. It has the definite hey at the beginning. Ha'anashim, which is the people. This word, avadim, which is slaves, is not definite. So, that's how we can tell that this is the subject of the sentence and this is the object. It is not the slaves were people, it is the people were slaves. Because if this word, ha'anashim, were the direct object, because it's definite, it would have an et in front of it. And you do actually have some Hebrew sentences that do that. You do have Hebrew sentences that begin with the direct object, and the subject is later on in the sentence. So I'm glad they use this as an example because it highlights the importance of the word et. Also, the third person of haya may be translated as there was or there were. So for instance, haya ish ba'ir. There was a man in the city. Or this one, hayu anashim ba'ir. There were people or there were men in the city. Also, the word lo can be added to the above to make them negative. So, ish lo haya ba'ir. There was not a man in the city. And again, I'm just going to refer back to the book. Here, I know this could be a lot. Feels like drinking through a fire hose probably, but here it is. We also have the use of the word bain. So the preposition bain can either mean between or among. And when the word bain is used in pairs, that's when it means between, otherwise it means among. So for example, Hamelech halach bain hanashim. The king walked among the women. So usually it means among, but used in pairs, it means between. For example, Hamelech halach bain hanashim ubain ha-banim. This is the king walked between the women and the children. It's really just, better English. Otherwise it would be, literally the king walked between the women and between the children. It's not the king walked among the women and among the children, because bain is used in a pair here. So that's the use of the word bain. Another note that the book throws in is that good Hebrew is not necessarily good English, which we've already talked about. Word-for-word translations may not sound good, obviously, so altering, such as moving, adding, or changing words, may be necessary, and this is how you get so many different interpretations and translations of Hebrew text. For example, this sentence, Halachti el habayit asher yashavti sham. So literally what this sentence says, I walked to the house where I resided there. That's a pretty bad sentence in English, right? So obviously you wouldn't want to do a word for word of this sentence because it just sounds bad. And sometimes if you do word for word, it can sound really confusing. So sometimes you have to add words to make a Hebrew sentence make more sense when you translate it, which we'll get to that in future chapters. But this is just, touching on it now. So a better way to say the sentence is, I walked to the house where I resided. All right, that's going to wrap it up for this chapter. So exercises for this one, I would recommend exercises 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, and I always recommend doing the tall tale at the end if that's an exercise. It is a great little story. It's a fun story. They all are. I like them all. And it's just really good practice to get used to reading Hebrew and putting into practice what we've learned in the chapter. So that's going to wrap it up for this one, the direct object. The next chapter is chapter 9, which will be going over singular word pairs. So we'll get to that next time. As for this week, these are the exercises to focus on, and I will see you next time. Bye.